Have you been enjoying our Impact Podcasts and our great guests? Then please give us a thumbs up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your favorite podcasts. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by CO2.com. Companies today are trying to figure out how to achieve high-quality climate credentials. CO2.com is the easy button for any business to go beyond offsetting and fund truly impactful projects across carbon, nature, and community. CO2 provides verified metrics that can be used in reporting and messaging. Have confidence in demonstrating your climate leadership. Go to CO2.com to access quality climate credentials you can trust on the road to net zero and nature positive. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Shigarian, and I'm so honored to have with us today Jennifer Carlson. She's the co-founder and executive director of Apprenti. Welcome, Jennifer, to the Impact Podcast.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you having me here.
Hey, we're going to be talking about, Jennifer, all the important and great things you're doing at Apprenti as the co-founder and the executive director. But before we get into that, it's always more fun to learn about Jennifer Carlson first and your background and bio and how do you even get here? What was some of your journey? Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I'll use a Beatles tune. It's a long and winding road.
I like that though. That's a good reference. So for someone relatively pretty young, I don't know how long and winding it is, but let's hear it.
So I'm from Denver, Colorado originally, but I grew up in radio. My dad was a radio guy, so which is a lot like being in the military. You move a lot.
Okay.
And my dad did play-by-play for the Kansas City Royals,
Wow.
the Chiefs, the third man on the Reds. And so we made a lot of bounces around between Kansas City and Cincinnati back to Colorado. And so I'm a Midwestern girl with a lot of homes.
Wow.
And I went into sports to begin with. So I did my undergrad in PR at Colorado State and my master's in business administration for sports at Ohio University. And thought I was going to follow in the family footsteps. Did it for a while, represented athletes, worked in the NBA and Major League Baseball, but came from a history of also working in corporate America with Progressive Insurance, doing marketing and sports marketing, and then AIG after that, launching a marketing initiative around one of their insurance products nationally. And so growing large P&Ls is kind of my background. And almost every job I've ever had has been me crafting and creating the job. And so this is sort of a natural but weird offshoot of all of that in that I've been around a lot of technology projects and have been the executive sponsor of some in the insurance industry. And there was a lot less diversity than there should have been. And a lot of hiring practice issues, just not able to hire enough people. And all of that sort of informed where I am now.
That's interesting. With that kind of to me, sometimes long and winding roads don't have to be typically long, but they have to be interesting. As you say, you moved around a lot. Your dad had a fascinating career that influenced you tremendously. But then what you get to do is because you did have different roles at different organizations that you sort of self-created, you also get to see where the white spaces are and the voids are. And then taking your expertise from both classic education and life, you get to fill those voids if you're so inclined and if you have the guts to be an entrepreneur. And obviously you do. So you co-found Apprenti. What year did you co-found Apprenti?
2015.
2015. And how many co-founders worked with you? Approximately two. Wow.
There's
So
me plus one. I'm the founder and he's the funder.
hey, listen, that works, right? You know, everybody, a lot of great ideas don't ever get off the kitchen table without the right amount of dough. So
Right.
that's tremendous. And for our listeners and viewers who are online or near their tech devices now that want to look up Jennifer and Apprenti, you can go to apprenticareers.org. Apprenticareers.org. So when you co-founded Apprenti in 2015, what was your general vision and mission then?
Interestingly enough, I wrote the business plan for this as a way to create a new pipeline of talent. Hard stop. Apprenticeship wasn't a word I used in the business plan.
Right.
And it was about taking people from our own backyard and reskilling them to fill the tech talent gap that we have, not just here in Washington, but nationally. And that was sort of the thesis behind this, is that not everybody needs to have a college degree, and not every occupation or role we fill in tech is a college requirement. Yet we've sort of artificially put that on everything. And so I had sat down with a number of companies here in Washington that sit on the board of the trade association for tech, and kind of talk through what would it need to look like for us to adopt and reskill people. And so your Microsoft, Amazon, Zillow, Tableau, these big companies were F5, we're all at the table. And we kind of talked through what this would look like, wrote this business plan, and it was just super serendipitous that it was at the same time that the Obama administration started funding money into apprenticeship for non-traditional sectors, which tech would be one.
Wow.
And the business plan went to the state of Washington's labor office, which is where the funds flow through. And they took a look at it and were like, yeah, you're just missing one word. This is perfect. And what this is an apprenticeship. Everything that you've drafted and how you reskill people is exactly what an apprenticeship is. It's a training model of classroom and on-the-job skills. So add one word and let's go after that money and see if we can fund a pilot here in Washington. So that's what we did.
And did it go to plan?
It did. We were able to secure a fund through the U.S. Department of Labor that ran through the state of Washington to fund the first 600 apprentices over 5 years, which we did here in Washington. And then something I would never, ever advise is expanding at the exact same time. And the U.S. Department of Labor put out contracts for 6 sectors independently 1 year into that grant. And we competed because it was one contract per sector. Wasn't thinking we would have a shot at it, and we won it. To take what we were doing here, because all of these employers are national employers, right, and they want the system to run identically everywhere. Wow. And they informed the process and said, we'll adopt it everywhere. So the DOL said, great, then we'll fund it. And so that meant having to do a tandem rollout of Washington State's pilot at the same time we were starting to expand nationally. Don't do that.
That is, but that's classic. That's a classic entrepreneurial move, though, because we sometimes our eyes become a little bit bigger than our tummies are, and it's just the way it goes. What I always love to learn, and our listeners love to understand, is how much of what you put down on that original business plan turned out to be the roadmap to where you started going, and what started getting you the traction and the success that you've massively become now, and how much did you iterate as you went along?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever really broken it down. If I had to, I would say the core concepts are still true, and we still operate.
Got it. I when I was reading about you and reading about Apprenti, the terminology nationally registered apprenticeships in technology. What does that mean? What's that? How does that align with what you're doing and what people should be thinking about?
So a registered apprenticeship is a credentialed occupation. So when you become a registered apprentice, when you graduate from whatever your role is, whether it's an electrician or it's a software developer, you leave with a certified credential from the U.S. Department of Labor. And the competencies or the role skills that you leave with were drafted and vetted by that industry. So the industry has said, if you've left with a software developer in Java, you're capable of this set of skills that have been formalized and registered with the government, that we know you know how to do that. And so it's national in that we work with the U.S. Department of Labor, but as you can imagine, the United States is made up of 50 other states. And so there are 28 systems of apprenticeship in the U.S. 27 states are independent. And then you've got the U.S. Department of Labor that overlays everything. So it's a little bit convoluted in a process, which is part of the reason why we exist. Because companies say, I needed to work one way. I don't want to have to figure out 27 systems.
Let's take the viewers and listeners through, soup to nuts. How does it work? Someone wants to seize your website, apprenticareers.org, and wants to get involved, wants to go to the next level in their career. How do they apply? How does it work? And what's our best outcome possible?
So 18 and over. Anybody 18 and over. I've placed somebody as young as 18 and as old as 65 into an apprenticeship. And the median age of my program is 32. So it's a lot of people who have 10, 12 years of work experience under their belt, and a lot of them looking to reskill and move into a different role. And the advantage to this is you don't have to have a tech background. So you can come to me. I'm not going to ask you for educational attainment, and I'm not going to ask you about your prior work experience. I don't want to know. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have tech experience. You come into Apprenti Careers, and there's a baseline assessment that you will take, and it's focused on core math, basic math, algebra with some geometry, and logic and critical thinking. Are you a good problem solver? There are some interpersonal skills, behavioral questions on there, and that's it. If you score over an 80, you are in my candidate pool. But at this point, it's been completely objective and hands-off. So now I'm working with, pick a company who comes to me and Kohl's says, I want this, or American Family Insurance comes to me and says, I want this. And they're going to fill 5 of these roles: cyber, software developer, data analyst. And then we will go to the pool, the candidate pool, and pull out names from that particular market and start screening you. And what we're doing on the first round interview is screening what skills you're bringing to the table. My favorite example is a Burger King manager who came to us. If he's applying to Amazon where he applied, of course, you're not going to get past the front door, right? Because they're going to say, I don't understand even why you're applying. Right. What they're coming to me with are skill sets that I'm distilling and sending back to the company and saying this person does supply chain management, payroll, scheduling, all of those things without the context of under what company they did it for are highly transferable skills. Right. And the company looks at that very differently once it's been stripped down. And then the company goes, great, I'm going to sponsor this person into apprenticeship, and they interview them on a soft skills basis. So they're not meeting a technical bar. It's are they getting through behavioral questions? How do you problem solve things if you were put in this situation? Right. Then they get sponsored into the apprenticeship. There is no cost to the candidate for the classroom. We're able to braid funding from state, federal government, private philanthropic dollars to cover the classroom costs. And you'll go into an immersive 4 to 5 month training window, 40 hours a week, that'll get you technically up to a bar. And then you already have your job offer, who you're working for, your start date and everything. And the only thing stopping you from getting there is that classroom window and potentially a background check if a company requires it. And that doesn't take you out of my candidate pool. It might just take you out of their candidate pool, and I can potentially move you somewhere else. And then you go to job for a full year as a paid employee to earn and learn. And you are placed with a mentor in that company who is helping you get up to speed on the job and getting you to a point that you can be retained in the role at the end of your apprenticeship.
Oh, amazing. And how do you gauge success? Now we know the whole life cycle. What's your success rate, and how does that look? What does success mean to you as the co-founder and leader of this great company?
2 words: retention, diverse. So for what we place through, over 90% of our placements come from underrepresented groups. We're focused on underrepresented minorities in tech, so BIPOC, Latino, Latina, Native American, Pacific Islander, people who have identified themselves as mixed race. Those are my core.
Okay.
Women, veterans, and persons with disabilities. 90% of my placements fit into that group.
Isn't it amazing that we live in these modern times? 63 million or 62 million, if my numbers are close to right, 62 million Americans are disabled in one way or another. And just like veterans, we just marginalize them and we try to leave them. They're almost the unseen, an unseen population historically. It's just shocking.
Yeah, 52% of my placements are vets.
Unbelievable.
Largely freshly separated. But similarly, my number 2 occupation is Uber driver.
Really?
People who, came out into a service industry and don't see a path anywhere else other than potentially going back to school and starting over,
Right.
which is not in the cards for most people.
Unbelievable. So you're focusing on diversity and retention. So your pool of folks are typically the marginalized and underrepresented people of the United States, number one.
Yep.
Number two, and let's go back to the retention. I know you mentioned that. What is typically your retention rate success?
88.5% stay with their employer of record.
This is amazing. So are you constantly, now that you're 8 years into this, has the flywheel kicked in? Are you now on a regular basis having applications flow in every day on the front end, and also having new corporations signing up for your program on the back end?
All of the above is yes, but there's an ebb and flow to the corporate side of that, as you know, where let's talk about is it a recession? Is it a right sizing? From a tech occupation, big tech companies are going through their attrition cycle right now. The good news is the non-tech companies are hiring still like crazy. So financial services, healthcare, insurance, retail. I am still placing a lot of people into tech, into apprenticeships with those other industries. The challenge is they don't take the numbers that the tech sector takes because that's all they live on. So this year will probably be a lower number than last year, which puts a dip in our growth cycle. But I also have a belief that that's going to pop back up come 2024 when we see more tech companies online.
You mentioned at the top of the show, Jennifer, that you started off obviously in Washington, soon there went national. Do other states come to you separately now and ask you to want to outsource their program to you and have you leverage your expertise and your technology to help run their programs as well?
Absolutely. So we're in 27 states operating, and we've placed somebody from all 50 states. So the great news is, yes, we can do that. What I typically do is it's less about partnering. I mean, yes, we have partnerships with states and government offices, but it's more about chambers of commerce and trade associations because they have the company relationships already ready-made. So Tech Pact in Philadelphia says we want to do this because our members need it. Because Philadelphia is not a huge tech city, but they are a healthcare, life sciences, bio industry, and financial services. There are all those other companies there trying to hire for tech. And so they've got us coming in to partner with them on delivery of apprentices to those industries.
That's wonderful. Is one of your greatest sources on the front end a happy, retained apprentice who's now become a full-time employee, and they're telling their friends and relatives, sign up for this and get on board?
Great word of mouth among existing apprentices, sending friends and family. Best one was I did a graduation just last November at Amazon, and a gentleman walked up to me and he said, "You don't know me." I was like, "No, I don't." He goes, "I'm here because of you." And he handed me his business card, and on his business card, it's in my wallet, was, "I'm here because of Apprenti," with a giant heart. And he was like, "I am 65 years old and I'm keeping up with these kids. and my life turned around because I was able to finally get into a real career. And I am loving every minute of this working in tech. And I was like, this is fantastic. So big hugs, keep the card in the wallet as my reminder.
Right.
I
That's awesome.
love those stories.
For our listeners and viewers who just joined us, we've got Jennifer Carlson with us today. She's the co-founder and executive director of Apprenti. If you want to find Apprenti, or if you want to sign up for an apprentice program, or have a company that wants to get started in setting one up, go to www.apprenticareers.org. Talk about a company now listening to this or watching this and wanting to get involved. How do we make this actionable so you get more companies bringing on these great apprentices?
Absolutely. Well, aside from reaching out to us directly, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask your company. We're going to go through some Q&A about, are you ready for an apprentice? It is different than what we're used to in our sector, which is poaching, right? We just keep robbing Peter to pay Paul and moving people around the chessboard. Right. And not actually creating anything net new. Skilling up talent is a different approach, and making that investment, it's the old adage. When was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today. If you're struggling to fill a role for longer than 3 months, and if you are paying for these middle skill software, data, cyber, and cloud roles, the same kind of finder's fees that you do to a retail recruiter, then apprenticeship is a great way to go. It'll be less expensive, and you'll have net new talent in the same amount of time that you would have if that job sat vacant for 3 or more months.
Right. I love that term, skilling up. Talk about that. Why is your program so great for job seekers seeking to skill up, and if they don't have a traditional, what has historically been in the United States, a traditional college degree? Why is the skilling up process made with less friction using your great platform?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors, a couple of things. Companies are finally being more pragmatic and accepting that not all roles are created equal, and that we've kind of put that artificial college degree requirement on everything where maybe it didn't need to be. And we as technology platform developers own the product, and therefore the certifications on how to work on the product. So this skilling up model means that we can train you on the platform at a much faster pace than putting somebody through the traditional college ranks. So it's less expensive, and you can take people with high aptitude, skill them through a certification or a language track, and get them into job faster with some hands-on experience. If you look at Europe and Asia, you got in Europe, 70% of people don't go through a university track. They go through apprenticeship, and they have apprenticeship for every single sector that's out there. And we're behind the times. And in this country, 65% of America never finished college. That doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to do this work. It means that their learning modality didn't work for college, or they simply didn't want to take the debt. And so this is a way to get around that and still make use of and create a whole new tranche of people in this country that could be doing this work domestically.
Is what the news, when you read about two of the hottest sectors in tech, Jennifer, AI and cybersecurity, are those industries that are now leveraging your great platform for apprentices?
Cyber, yes. AI, coming. AI is still kind of embryonic in its development as it is. Right. So the people who are in it are like high-end mathematicians at this point still.
But that day is coming. That day is
coming. That's right.
So let's go back to cyber then. Every time I read about the cyber industry, there seems to be a massive shortage of cyber professionals out there. So is that part of is filling those gaps? Has that been part of your growth model?
Absolutely. It has also been kind of a growth cycle in cyber. It went from 4 or 5 years ago being, we need people who are at a much higher echelon to do this work, to now let's create cyber analysts and teach them software development with it, and then have them grow into the role. Whereas previously it was still kind of a poaching environment where we were taking people who had half the skill already and just coaching them on the cyber portion of it. By doing that, it's left open vacancies we can now fill, kind of a backfilling environment, but
Right.
it doesn't change the fact that there needed to be a shift in the mentality of how we hire and what level. Again, not all jobs have to start at this level. If we start here, we can create kind of an organic growth model to that to get people to the level we need them to be at. And that's going to enable us to have a secondary tranche and not just a single that comes through academia.
When you wrote the business plan in 2015, were there other organizations that you were excited about or were doing this and not doing it so well? And who's your competitive landscape look like today?
So there were some that were trying it, some companies that were doing it internally for themselves. But that doesn't scale from an adoptive standpoint.
Right.
And even a few of those very large companies doing it in a single market, now trying to figure out that 5 years in, how do they replicate that in 3 other major markets for themselves, and looking at how much it costs them to build it in one location and now having to triple or quadruple that, and their business is balking at that investment. And so, we didn't come into this with a belief that we would build apprenticeship for all per se. What we ended up doing was becoming an intermediary to close the gaps in the system where companies had pain. So companies were on that whole initial tranche that we met with to kind of craft what apprenticeship was going to look like, said, we're not good at attracting diverse talent and assessing skill sets that don't come from a resume. And we said, great. So now we know we're going to have to build the talent pipeline. And then I met with and created a council of folks from diverse populations to talk about what are your barriers to entry? How is it that it's difficult for you to get recognition coming in? And it was difficulty on mapping skill sets to the job if they didn't have the degree. And I was like, okay, companies, I need you to come this way. And I need you to understand on the other side that there's still a math and a logic component that has to be there. This can't be for everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody can't eventually get skilled to that level, but they're going to have to meet a bar to get in, right? And so both sides kind of had to meet in the middle. And so there was a lot of mapping going on across the country for local market initiatives and company initiatives to who was doing what pieces of this puzzle well, and how do we pull in some of those best practices as we map out how to roll this out on a scaled level nationally. So yes, that early stage was definitely there, and there were some orgs that were doing it really well, just very localized. On a footprint now, you've got versions of what we do as an intermediary. We've closed the talent gap and the business operations gap and the payroll and benefits gap and all these business services we've kind of had to build in on behalf of companies. And so you now got a version of us out there like an Aption, that they are the employer of record who sends them out to the companies where the companies have difficulty hiring. You've got us that can do it either way, or can even help a company set up their own program internally. You've got some for-profits out there that are, doing the training in-house as well as the placement, whereas we outsource the training to third parties in order to be able to lather, rinse, and repeat and move things around if anything changes quickly. But there's a few versions of us out there now based on what somebody's looking for.
You mentioned that great story of a gentleman writing you the note and you carrying that card in your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Ageism, I'm 60 now. Is ageism still a growing trend in America?
I think on a personal level, technology, there's probably a little bit of that, if for no other reason. There are a lot of people that are struggling to keep up with the world, particularly as we see more and more move towards AI, self-driving vehicles. Like that's scary to a lot of people.
It is.
So there's probably a growing trend towards that. I will also say, for a long time, our youngest end of the spectrum, because they still haven't figured out what they want to do,
right?
And B, may not have I don't mean this in a negative way, but the business maturity.
Understood.
That younger group is sometimes a little more challenging for the company. I mean, the business acumen can be trained and the intellectual is there. It's just an application. Is it being applied and managed correctly? That can be more challenging. And so the median age being 32, most companies are actually excited about the fact that they're getting people who know how to show up to work, are, adept at coming to an office, and have, a certain amount of business acumen coming in the door. And that's been really well received.
The issue of diversity in the tech workforce, that's holds a special place in your heart in terms of your mission. Obviously, you're creating already a huge win, as you said, to have net positive employees coming into the tech workforce itself net, a tremendous win as a mission, as a business model, et cetera. But what you've also laid on top of that is, like you said, the marginalized and underrepresented are also now taking huge advantage of your platform.
Yep.
How important is that to you? And how far do we have to go yet in this country in terms of diversity in not only the tech workforce, but the workforce itself?
Well, it is very important to me. For me, it's I don't know. I can't even get into how seriously important it is to me, but it's that the world in the office place needs to look like the world we see when we walk down the street. And more importantly, when I think of tech, the easiest way I can put it is the products that we consume on a daily basis need to be informed by and built by the same people that are consuming it, which are far more diverse than the people who are currently doing that.
It's true. That's fascinating.
And I will add only one thing. The most important place for it to be is AI. The most important.
Explain.
Because if we have only one group of people building the AI that is going to drive how decisions get made, content gets written, then it's only coming through the lens of one group of people.
Right.
And it will by default alienate everybody else.
That's right.
It has to have representation from every walk of life in it in order for it to truly function and work for everyone.
So as AI becomes more ubiquitous as an industry and as a business, you then hope to be filling the roles in tech at those AI startups and growth companies.
Yes.
That's brilliant. That makes a whole lot of sense. As an entrepreneur, you have a couple of different things that I would love you to consider. Managing and making. Managing is managing your business that you've built and already a huge success, but making the further creation of growing your business and making it even bigger and better, whatever that means to you and your co-founder. How does your day break down today in terms of managing and making?
More managing than making, but I need it to be reversed.
Right.
We run this as a nonprofit for a reason. I founded it as a nonprofit for a reason. Okay. It was in order to get access to state and federal stimulus on behalf of companies that they wouldn't be able to get on their own to support the adoption of this. Yep. And also because, as I've had many conversations with these companies, the view is if you're a for-profit that you're going to take everything you learn from me and use it against me eventually financially, to make more money, right? It's a much easier time for me to convene 3 major companies in the tech sector at this table together to talk about how to solve a bigger problem together that I wouldn't be able to do as a for-profit.
Makes sense.
So it also puts us at a disadvantage financially because there is no private equity or venture funds to help us scale rapidly. So we spend a lot of time piecemealing funding from 40, 50 different sources of funding in order to make it work. And in 7 years, I've raised over $60 million in capital from state, federal, and philanthropic agencies. But that is hugely time consuming and hard to sustain without concerted effort.
Raising capital always is. I want to go back to that funding in a little bit. Let's go back to the issue of, your balancing act of front end and back end.
Yeah.
How is that balancing act done by you on a regular basis in terms of people coming through the front door and wanting to be, part of your candidate pool, and corporations coming through the other door wanting to be on the pull side of your of your employee base and apprentice base?
So, as you know, our numbers, I think we're like just pushing 3,000 right now. I have 280 companies. So that's a little, 11 per company on average.
Yeah.
And I have 38,000 applicants.
Wow.
38,000 people ready-made sitting in my candidate pool. And let's be fair, of the 38,000, about 50% don't pass the assessment, at least not the first time by, to get into that. So if you still look at half of those people,
19?
right, I've still got 19,000 people sitting here ready to go, 3,000 placed, and I am happy to scale all of those numbers and take on as many companies that want to come knock down this door, because I can't get to you on my own with basic blocking and tackling fast enough.
I love it. You were honored. Apprenti was honored by the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship as members of the inaugural cohort of apprenticeship ambassadors. What does that mean?
To do exactly what we're doing right here, talking about how do we move the needle, meeting with as many companies and as organizations as we can to talk through what does adoption look like, get the country to change, have a better culture conversation, and to talk particularly with large companies who have scale capacity about this is not CSR. This is not corporate social responsibility where it might have been viewed 6 or 7 years ago, along with every boot camp out there and every other organization that says that they can create talent for you. Apprenticeship is a consistent, stable effort by the government and by major corporations and trade associations as a way to build a talent pipeline that can parallel university track, but it requires sustained engagement. And companies have got to figure out how to funnel all of those other programs in through one system in order for this to scale and for apprenticeship to become equitably what it is in all of Asia and all of Europe.
Amazing. So Asia and Europe were that far ahead of us and we were that far behind.
Post World War II, Europe went 100% to apprenticeships as a way to train people. And whether you're in culinary, veterinary, medical, all roles you can do as apprenticeships. 30% go university, 70% go apprenticeship. And in fact, even if you go to Great Britain, 1% of the British GDP underwrites apprenticeships for the country and is automatically funneled. It is a required tax. Everybody funds it. And every company is obligated to take apprentices.
That's fast. Europe did it before Asia, and then Asia followed them up?
Asia followed it, but Japan very similarly did it post World War II. And if you look at Korea, Singapore, some in Vietnam, but they probably are not as pervasive in terms of all industries, but in far more industries than the US, whereas we have up until 10 years ago been very heavy building, construction, and manufacturing trades. Right. It is only 10 years ago that really this became a bigger deal for financial services, healthcare, and everything else trying to figure out how to do this, and only actively funded 7 years ago.
Unbelievable.
I mean, we're moving the needle very quickly, but it has been a very large learning curve.
That's right. That's right.
For companies. And then there's a culture change that has to come with that.
And none of that's easy, by the way. None of that's easy. And part of what you do, or a lot of what you do, is what we're doing here today, is education.
That's right.
Right in the word. Your Apprenti was one of the 3 key stakeholders in the White House's cybersecurity apprenticeship sprint initiative. What is that?
Exactly what it sounds like. It was a focus on accelerating company uptake of apprenticeships in cybersecurity.
Under what administration?
The current, under Biden.
Got it. I just wanted to understand that.
Yeah.
What was the yield out of that?
I can't speak on their behalf, but I think there were over 100 companies that signed on collectively between the 3 of us. And they're now measuring outcomes on apprentice placements for the next couple of years. But there were already, I think, 400 or 500 apprentices collectively just during that window. But
let's just say this, net a huge success.
Huge success. And again, a big raising in awareness and piloting of how to do it. Yes.
Got it. The Good Job Challenge. You were recently awarded a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce for the Good Job Challenge. What's the Good Job Challenge?
So the Good Job Challenge is exactly what it sounds like. It is intended to create jobs that have living wages. So these are not minimum wage jobs. This is not intended to be, $7.50 to $15 an hour jobs. These are jobs that can be sustained family living wages for a family of four, which means they're healthcare, manufacturing, IT. These are and financial services, people who can get skilled through apprenticeship or similar programs into jobs that they either weren't eligible for, didn't have degrees for, and get placed with longevity. They are taking what was originally built by the U.S. Department of Labor and expanding on that work. And they are actually launching a research study with the Census Bureau. I don't know if I should talk about that, but I think I can, where they'll be able to track the outcomes from all 33 of us long term so that they can see what the economic impact of this is. As you mentioned earlier, the numbers that we have, my average wage for somebody who was employed coming into my program was $40,000 if they were engaged, if they had a job. 26% of them didn't. They were unemployed or long-term unemployed coming into me. In the apprenticeship nationally, my median wage is 65, 66, and my retained wage for that 88.5% is almost 90. So like these are transforming outcomes, and that's what they want to see for each of those sectors is what does that look like and how long-term is it and how sustained is it in terms of their ability to progress in the career after they get through an apprenticeship.
And then shifting over to the Good Jobs Commerce Grant, which you just received $23.5 million for those two to place over 2,000 apprentices over the course of 3 years.
Yes.
Talk about the success, the net success that came out of that 23 million, because you said you raised about $60 million. That was 23 of it there, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And so
we're
still,
what success looks like from that.
I'm looking at my watch. We're 8 months into that. So we're not 3 years into it. We're only 8 months in.
Wow. Only 8. Okay.
And 19 of that 23.5 million goes directly to pay for the classroom training. So that is the RTI so that there's no cost to the apprentices coming through the program. The other 4.5 million is distributed over some project work and our ability to staff this for the next, for the remaining term of the 3 years. So there's some OpEx in there, but like I said, mostly the RTI or the classroom cost.
Yeah. And in terms of those apprentices that you've already started placing, let's talk about how is it working? Some of the numbers I saw are sort of really eye-popping. 88% of these apprentices are being retained by their employers post apprenticeship.
Yep.
92% of these apprentices came from historically underrepresented groups, as we talked about earlier.
Yep.
$86,000 a year average income.
Yep.
I mean,
big money compared to what they were making coming in, and the bulk of them. Half of them have some kind of a degree, but night and weekend school, online school, for-profit schools, and none of them in tech really. Like it's their liberal arts degrees, and the other half no degree. And they're still there.
17% of these apprentices have been identified with having some form of disability.
They've self-identified and asked for an accommodation.
And 25% or so, 24% to be exact, were unemployed prior.
Yes, correct.
Amazing. Jennifer, how many people now work for Apprenti?
Ooh, I think we're at, so direct for me, I think I'm at 22.
Right.
And then there's about 12 more that are shared resources with my business partner, the funder side, the trade association, where we share business services. Understood.
Jennifer, obviously the white space is still there, the void is still there, and you're, like I said, you're very young, but doing some great important work. What does the future look like? What's your vision now, 8 years into this, and where are you going to take Apprenti in the years to come?
Well, we graduate 75,000 people with computer science degrees a year in this country.
Okay.
Nowhere near enough. We, out of 85,000 H-1B visas allowed in the country every year, tech takes 60,000 of them. And we left over 900,000 jobs vacant last year. So I see no reason why apprenticeship, let alone Apprenti, shouldn't be the third leg on that stool, generating 80 to 100,000 apprentices a year. And shifting not only the way we view skill sets and talent and how we define talent, but also changing the complexity or the complexion of our talent workforce in tech. And I would love to see that in the next 10 years scale rapidly so that we were delivering 10,000 apprentices a year instead of 1,000, and getting a really high jump on not only closing that tech talent gap, but also the fact that that number is going to continue to grow as we automate more and more. We're going to create new jobs at a faster clip than we're even creating them today. So we're so far behind that curve. I want to see this turn the corner of being a sustained and equitable talent pipeline, comparable to college for everybody else, for the everyone else that is 70% of the country.
That's amazing. And that statistic actually blew me away when you brought that up. I didn't realize we're leaving that many people behind, and that many people feeling like they're just knocking on the glass but don't have a chance to get in the door. I mean,
well, and there's a debate going on about whether apprentices should count towards college credit. And while we work on that right now, and we are making some efforts to try and get degree or credit bearing attached to it, whether employers actually require it is a different subject. But we're trying to avoid what we have discovered is called the paper ceiling. The idea that this paper ceiling leads to you not being able to career progress because you didn't have the degree. So if we can get people further along that spectrum, let's do it.
Well, listen, I mean, the truth is, with information democratized post 98, Google being founded and the internet world taking off, and great companies like yours leveraging technology to do the great work you're doing, there's no sense that it's no longer just this information that used to be on hollow ground at our graded universities in America. Is they're not just the only bastions of hope for an education anymore. Now, your organization, the internet, has democratized information, and it's out there for people if they want it. So to me, shame on us on the paper ceiling. You know, if you're a listener and you want to become a candidate in Jennifer's great program, or your company and you want to sign up and start hiring people, taking on apprentices, please go to Jennifer's site, Apprenti's site, www.apprenticareers.org. Jennifer Carlson, you are the reason that we created this impact show 17 years ago or so. You're doing great work. You're making a better and more diverse workplace for us and filling voids that obviously needed filling. Thank you for spending time with us today. You're always welcome back on the Impact Podcast to continue your journey and continue your great story. I wish you continued great health and success.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com.